Alright chicos, hoy vamos a aprender el subjuntivo versus el indicativo. So primero vamos a repasar el uso del subjuntivo. So when do we actually use the subjunctive? As we already learned, you use the subjunctive when there are two people and we cannot control the action of that other person. Because we are unable to control the action of others, we have doubt or we are not sure if the action is going to occur. That is the key factor of the subjunctive, is when we have that doubt of that action occurring. Let's look at some examples. Yo espero que tú hagas la tarea. I hope that you do the homework. Although I hope it will be done, because I cannot control the action of you, I don't know if that action of doing the homework is going to occur, and therefore the verb hacer is in the subjunctive. Es importante que reciclemos para proteger el planeta. It's important that we recycle to protect the planet. It may be important that this action happens, but we still have doubt and are not sure whether or not that recycling is going to occur. Don't forget, we need to use the formula of the subjunctive in order to make sure that we are following all the steps and the formula of the subjunctive is being used appropriately and our sentence makes sense in Spanish. So our formula is as follows. Primero necesitamos persona número uno. Entonces necesitamos un verbo de weirdo en el presente, and you're going to be conjugating that verb in the present tense according to person number one. Entonces necesitamos que, persona número dos, y por fin el verbo en el subjuntivo. Remember that verb in the subjunctive is getting conjugated according to person number two, and any verb can be conjugated into the subjunctive in that second clause. However, we only have a very specific list of verbs that are considered weirdo verbs, and it cannot be any verb that we like. Let's look at the example above and be sure that we are following the same formula as we see here. So in our first sentence, person number one is yo. Our verb in the present tense is espero. We have our que connector. We have person number two, which is tú. And we have our verb hacer, which is conjugated in the subjunctive form for our person number two. We can see this follows the formula exactly, which is why it makes sense, and it is conjugated appropriately for all parties. Remember that the key pieces of the subjunctive formula are that you have to have two different people, and you have two different tenses. We have the first tense is always in the present tense for our weirdo verb, and we have our second verb is in the subjunctive. So now let's move on to when we use the indicative. So first, what actually is the indicative? The indicative is just a fancy name for the present tense, which we know how to use very well. But when do we actually use this instead of the subjunctive? So primero usamos el indicativo cuando no hay dos personas y tenemos control de la acción. If we don't have two people, we have more control over the action. If I'm talking about something that I'm going to do, well, I'm in complete control over whether or not I do that action, and therefore that doubt and loss of control is not a factor anymore. Por ejemplo, yo espero que yo pueda hacer la tarea esta noche. I hope that I can do the homework tonight. I'm in control of that action because I'm the only subject. It's yo and yo. If I said, I hope that you can do the homework tonight, that's not really in my control. But if I say, I hope that I do the homework, I'm in control of that action, and therefore the subjunctive is not being called in, and I'm going to be using the indicative or the present tense in order to conjugate that second verb of poder to puedo. We also use the indicative when there is no doubt and we are sure as to whether or not that action is going to happen. Yo sé que siempre reciclas para proteger el planeta. I know that you always recycle to protect the planet. Since I am saying here that I know that it happens, it is no longer something of doubt or that I'm unsure of. My phrasing here indicates to me that this is not a doubted action. It is 100% certain to me, and therefore I do not use the subjunctive, even though somebody else is in the equation. You are the person who is the conjugation or the subject that is conjugated for reciclar in the second part of the sentence. However, I'm saying that I am certain that happens, and so there is no doubt, and therefore there is no subjunctive. Let's go ahead and practice. As we move through each of the questions, take a moment to practice and see if you can identify if the sentence should be using the subjunctive or the indicative based on the context. Número uno. Es dudoso que tengamos o tenemos tarea esta noche. Es dudoso que tengamos tarea. We use the subjunctive here because we're using the impersonal expression of it's doubtful that. Because it is doubtful whether or not this is going to happen, we need to be using the subjunctive. Número 2. Estoy seguro que sepas o sabes mi número de teléfono. It sabes. We're using the indicative here because I'm saying I am sure that you know my telephone number. Since I am sure that you know this information, it is not doubtful, and therefore we do not use the subjunctive. Número 3. Es importante que ella ayude o ayuda a los estudiantes. Subjunctive. You can see that this is started by an impersonal expression of it's important that. But even though it's important that it happens, it's still doubtful as to whether or not it's going to happen. Número 4. Tú deseas que tú puedas o puedes estudiar mucho. Puedes. Because there are not two people, it's only one subject being involved, that person has complete control as to whether or not that action occurs, and therefore we use the indicative. Número 5. Yo creo que nosotros necesitamos apoyar a nuestros amigos. Necesitamos. We're using the indicative here because I'm saying I believe. Since I'm saying I believe that we need to support our friends, I believe that's going to happen, and therefore it is certain to me, and therefore in the indicative because there's no doubt in my mind. Número 6. Ella está contento de que él complete o completa el examen. Complete. We're using the subjunctive because, as you can see in the first part, we have a weirdo verb of an emotion of being happy that he completes the exam. All right, hopefully you did well on those questions. Let's do a quick review over the general rules so we know when to use the subjunctive and when to use the indicative. For the subjunctive, it follows the formula of the subjunctive formula we went over at the beginning of person 1 plus weirdo verb in the present plus K plus subject 2 plus any verb in the subjunctive. The indicative does not follow that formula. So if you see a sentence that does not follow the formula, it is likely that it is not going to be in the subjunctive. For the subjunctive, there are two people and we cannot control the action that is going to occur. However, in the indicative, if there's only one person, we have control over whether or not that action happens. And lastly, in the subjunctive, there is doubt or we are not sure of what's going to happen. In the indicative, there is not doubt and we are sure of what's going to happen, and therefore we use the indicative rather than the subjunctive. I hope that this lesson helped you and that you better understand when to use the subjunctive versus when you use the indicative.